Hello everybody, Kyle here. I'm delighted to give a review for The Flash. I was lucky enough to score tickets to an early screening of this film last night, to almost more than a week in advance before this film comes out. I've always wanted to do this, and I was so glad I got to do it. Um, I gotta say that right off the top, this is a non-spoiler review, so I'm not going to reveal any of the spoilers. One of the reasons why I saw it early, so I didn't get spoiled myself. And also, I do want to say that, you know, with my review, I have to separate the art from the artist because I do not condone the actions of Ezra Miller, the star of the film. And I think that if the allegations and all that is true, then they should simply um, not be the Flash anymore, because that is way too serious and way too disturbing. But that being said, I was very disappointed with this film. Um, I thought, honestly, I could have seen this movie be one of DC's best films, and I went into it with many reviews and critics saying it was one of DC's best films. And all film is subjective, so that being said, I mean, some people may indeed think that this is one of DC's best films. I personally do not. In fact, I don't have it anywhere near like my top 20 to 30 DC films, because for me, um this film I think is a major missed opportunity because it is adapting the Flashpoint storyline from the comics. And I am not one that is like, ooh, everything has to be very, you know, accurate to the comics. You don't need to have a certain character from the comics appear in the film. A character doesn't have to look like they did in the comics in the film. But every now and again, I will see a film and I'll say to myself, huh, why didn't they do this like they did in the comics? Because they just did it in a better way in the comics. And one of the things I will talk about with one of my criticisms is the inclusion of Batman in the storyline. Because in the Flashpoint comics, the inclusion of Batman is specifically revolved around his father, Thomas Wayne, because when Barry goes back in time, he changes the timeline, and therefore Bruce Wayne is killed as a child and not Thomas Wayne, and then Thomas Wayne becomes Batman. Here they didn't go that route, and instead they decided to introduce Michael Keaton, or reintroduce Michael Keaton as Batman into the storyline. And this is where we start to see, I think, the cracks start to show for this film, because the inclusion of Michael Keaton as Batman, I could not be more excited for, because when going into it, I grew up with Michael Keaton as Batman. I never thought I'd see him again as Batman. And to be fair, he is quite good in this film. It's Michael Keaton as Batman. What more could you expect? But at the same time, I don't really feel like he was that necessary. One of those things where he's a plot device that I could honestly see be swapped out by any other character. It doesn't even need to be Batman. Like, they could have gotten, Cyborg. They could have gotten, you know, because I think one of the reasons why he's there is to help understand the multiverse and what's going on. But there are a number of smart characters in the DC universe, and I just feel like the inclusion of him in this movie felt more nostalgia driven than it did plot driven. And it's a shame, because after seeing Across the Spider-Verse, I see how well they can utilize bringing in characters from other dimensions, characters from other worlds. Even in No Way Home, they found a crucial way to apply Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield to the plot of the movie, and also the villains to the plot of the movie. But here, this film feels more like, hey, if you're a DC fan, here's some characters you remember from the past, but I wanted more with him. I wanted to learn more about Michael Keaton's Batman in this movie. I wanted to see more of Gotham. I wanted to see more of his relationship with like Flash and how that maybe connects to his relationship with Ben Affleck's Batman. And that's another thing. I feel like Ben Affleck is wasted in this film. He has an action sequence as Batman, and to be honest, listen, I don't mind Justice League from 2017, but I will say that that film does have the issue of changing Batman's character to the point where this does not quite feel like the same Batman from Batman versus Superman. And it's not just that he's changed and because he definitely is in a different place, but the Batman in Batman versus Superman is a very dark, brooding character that is very vengeful, but in Justice League, he tends to seem to crack jokes and be the butt of jokes at times, and that doesn't quite work. And once again, that follows through in this film because I do feel like some of the elements of this film feel very much like Justice League 2017, especially the way that you have Barry interacting with Batman and all that. And I just feel like I don't know. I I didn't feel that connected to Ben Affleck's Batman in this film. I personally think it's his weakest performance as Batman. Um, and then to get into Supergirl, she's also one of the main promotional elements of the film. Sasha Calle, I think, looks like she's a great actress that is going to be going places in her career, and she has a presence as Supergirl that is felt and all that. The problem is her character, I think, is written very poorly because she doesn't necessarily have that much to do aside from fight and, without going into spoilers, help a character get to a certain point in the film. And that's about it we get from Supergirl. I understand it's not a Supergirl movie, it's a Flash movie, just like it's not a Batman movie. But I really wish they found a better way to incorporate her into this story. And once again, without getting into spoilers, the way they end her storyline in the film, I felt was, I mean, disappointing to say the least, but almost insulting and disrespectful to Supergirl because to introduce this larger than life character, one of the icons of comic book media, and to do what they do to her at the end of the film, it didn't work for me. And when leaving the film, I continued to think about it, and I just hope Sasha Calle gets a second chance to play this role because I think she'll be very good if they give her, the right material. And Woman of Tomorrow is definitely the right material for Supergirl that you could get, especially I could see Sasha Calle playing it. But I don't know, with all this hype going into like Supergirl in this movie, Batman in this movie, those two characters felt, despite the performances of these actors and some pretty cool action scenes, I will give them that, it felt like they were kind of not used to their full potential. Now, of course, I'm basically saving the main course of this to last, The Flash. How is Ezra Miller in this film? How is Barry Allen? I actually been a fan of Ezra Miller as Barry Allen in the last number of DC movies, especially the Justice League films, and I think Ezra Miller is really good as the Flash. However, I do not know how. I was a bit irritated by him watching this film because the idea to include two versions of Flash, I think, just doubled down on how annoying it was to see Ezra Miller as the Flash here. And I don't know if it's because they wanted to explore more of how obnoxious or irritating the Flash can be, but it did not work for me. And the opening scene of the film, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about the opening scene, which is just, it's a giant action sequence. It's one of my least favorite scenes in the movie because it feels more like once again, Justice League 2017, then it really does feel like not just Zack Snyder's DC universe, but I mean, I'm seeing so many DC types of worlds, whether it's the Batman, whether it's Joker, whether it's the television series, and there's something not fake, but it almost feels like it's not as organic when you're watching these movies now. And it feels more like it's done by like executives. It doesn't feel like it's made by someone with a clear vision. And that's the thing about this movie. I think Andy Muschietti, he just, I think he can direct some pretty nice looking action sequences, but the heart of this story, I just could not find myself emotionally connected to. And I wonder if that's in part because of how emotionally connected I was with the Flash TV series. Because the Flash TV series, I think, did a much better job with the character and the story than this film does. And this film kind of relies on the storyline for the Flash with his mother, with his father, that we haven't really gotten much of in the DC universe so far, at least the DCEU. And that's a shame. It really is, because I feel like a number of years ago when this movie was being developed, because it was originally supposed to come out in 2018, I do feel like a number of years ago this film may have been even better, because they would have had to figure out a way to continue the story of the character from their Justice League and maybe get another visionary director like a Rick Famuyiwa or the directors of Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, we could have really had, I think, a special movie where this movie, it just doesn't feel that way to me. It doesn't feel as special as I've seen a lot of people say. It feels artificial. It feels like something that, as they say, AI could have created. Sure, there are like emotional moments, but I feel like they are so few and far between that I remember there's one scene in the movie, it's probably like, I want to say, half an hour into the film, where you finally like, oh, this is the emotion. But the beginning of the film is just this goofy sequence that might work for some, but did not work for me. There are a number of things. There are a bunch of cameos in this movie. Some of the cameos I found to be exploiting various actors' images and very distasteful. I won't say which ones they are, but I think there will be a greater conversation to be had in the coming weeks after this film's released about what is nostalgia and why are we hanging on to it so badly. Because there are some scenes in this movie that have nothing to do with this movie and are only used so that people in the audience can be like, hey! And that's not great filmmaking. Great filmmaking, especially great comic book movie filmmaking, is when you are focused on the character and you are focused on the world of that character. Not being like, hey, there's a cameo, there's another cameo. I also wish that Kiersey Clemons as Iris West had more to do. I really loved her performance in this movie, but it just felt to me like she was put to the side so that some other Flash characters, or not even Flash characters, but other DC characters could, take the spotlight, which is a shame because Iris West is one of the most important Flash characters. The opening of the film has like a sequence involving these bank robbers, and yet they're just bank robbers. They could have been actual DC characters we knew. They actual Flash DC characters. It's a shame too, because like after seeing Across the Spider-Verse, you watch some of the cameos utilized in this film and you're like, this has no bearing on the plot at all. And when that happens, people will forget the film. yes, they'll remember, oh, I love this surprise reveal. But how long will they remember it like they do in The Dark Knight when the Joker blows up the hospital, or when we see in, Spider-Man 1 when he's fighting Green Goblin, or Spider-Man 2 when Doc Ock's in his hospital sequence. Like, there are so many great sequences in comic book movies that I personally, when watching this film, I don't see people remembering in T minus, 3 years. And that's that. I was disappointed. I wish that they, focused more on the Flash movie and less on, the DC universe as a whole. And if they did focus on the DC universe, I also wish they kind of focused more on the characters that were taking center stage, like Batman, like Supergirl. And some things just are very confusing and sometimes just never explained in this film, whether it's the multiverse, whether it's even Barry's mother and his father and the case revolving around that. Like, it's not really a spoiler to say, but Barry's father has, like, what? 2 scenes in this film? Like, the man that causes Barry to, have, cause the events of this film, we barely get to see much of in this movie. And it's like, I don't know. I'm gonna keep thinking about it. It did have some redeeming moments, like some of the action, like some of the acting, whether it's Michael Keaton, whether it's Kiersey Clemens. And also, it does have a very fun ending, I will say that. The ending I enjoyed. But also, before I end this, I also say that I found the music to be a little strange, because Benjamin Wallfisch did the score, and it's very standard. It doesn't really grab me like Hans Zimmer's scores do. And also, they don't utilize the scores like I think, like, they're very choosy. When General Zod appears in this movie, you don't hear Zod's theme from Man of Steel. But when Batman from 1989 appears, you hear his theme. It's funny, there's thunder that just... if you just heard the thunder, just when I was talking about Danny Elfman's Batman theme. But, yeah, so many things I was disappointed with in this film, and I think it's a mess. I think the film is a mess, and I think that it is being overhyped, because I do think that it's not one of the best comic book movies ever. So anyway, this was a much longer review than I intended, so thank you so much for listening. Let me know when you see The Flash and what you think of it. Take care, everybody. Bye.